The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. The first season is out in full on Amazon Prime. 8 episodes, a little over an hour each. It's apparently the most expensive TV show ever created. Apparently, so far, Amazon has already spent upwards of $1 billion creating it, which is just utterly insane. Now, a large part of this cost is expected to be an upfront cost of stuff like building the sets, props, costumes, all of that stuff, which will be used for many more seasons. Rumor has it around 5 seasons are planned at least. And also a significant amount of money was spent on just the rights to the source material, to the Tolkien estate, which is very strange when you examine what the showrunners actually bought for that money. They can't adapt or reference the Third Age, so Hobbit and Lord of the Rings books are out. They can't use Silmarillion and any of the First Age stuff. What they can use is just appendixes to the Lord of the Rings books, which is quite little in terms of actual storytelling. They're more like encyclopedic descriptions of important events, lineages of characters in different nations, and stuff like that. So the show is set during the Second Age, but the actual story is largely made up. I mean, it centers 2 major events in Tolkien lore: the Forging of the Rings and the Fall of Numenor. But the actual storylines are mostly invented, so are many of the characters. Things are changed, modified, and made up by the writers who don't actually have a lot of previous experience. So, of course, there was a lot of worry whether the show would be good. And of course, there was also the insane amount of hatred on the internet, because they dared cast people of color as elves and dwarfs and so on. Now, that last part, I don't really give a fuck personally. If the cast is good and the story is good, you can be any color you like. In fact, I think it's pretty fucking idiotic that there's so much of the racist vitriol on the internet and the dumb complaints that, to the point that it actually diminishes the actual constructive criticism. It makes it more difficult to get through, because a lot of that constructive criticism becomes labeled and deflected as, oh, you don't like the show because you don't like black people. It needs to be said that there is a difference, and that difference should be recognized. And as much as we should condemn or at least ignore the shitty wave of hate on the web, we shouldn't disregard genuine criticism. Especially because the writing concern proved to be much more of an actual problem. See, the show has probably the worst, strangest pacing of all the prestige shows in recent years, fantasy and otherwise. It feels like for the majority of the first season, barely anything actually happens. And then finally, in the last episode, a number of hugely important events are squashed into about 15 minutes of runtime. Now, I'm generally okay with slow shows. I don't mind entire seasons of setup to then get a real payoff. However, there needs to be something that draws me in during those slow periods of time. The dialogue, the characters and their interactions, some sort of drama, even if it isn't on a huge scale. A good example here is a show like Better Call Saul. And unfortunately, in this regard, Rings of Power falters quite significantly. The characters are shallow and poorly written. Many of the performances felt flat and one-dimensional, including even Morfydd Clark as Galadriel, which was shocking to me because I saw her in Saint Maud previously, and I loved her in that film. I think she can be a great actress, but she just doesn't do anything interesting here. The dialogue is either average or straight up bad. Some of the characters' decisions and motivations make little sense, like the infamous now Galadriel jumping into the ocean to swim back to Middle-earth in one of the early episodes. And it's all just kind of boring and even worse, inconsequential. Everything that happens through season 1 could easily be condensed into an hour of television, and you wouldn't miss almost any stuff like great drama or character development, because there isn't almost any. Now, okay, I'll be fair and I'll admit that the show does have some strengths. It's not all terrible like some people paint it to be. Durin and Elrond's storyline is quite interesting, and Durin himself, along with his father and then Disa, his wife, are probably 3 of the best characters in the entire show, and I really enjoyed their storyline and the scenes that they had together. I liked Elendil as a character, even though not a lot of stuff is done with him in the end. I think Adar was a really cool antagonist, and the orcs look terrific. The showrunners used mostly practical effects for them, and it really shows they're very believable. It's also pretty much the best looking TV show ever in terms of the environments, locations, and the CGI. It is stunningly beautiful, really worth seeing in 4K on the biggest TV you can get. And you can see that this part of the budget was used well. Numenor, Lindon, Eregion, but especially Moria in its glory days, they all just pop out of the screen, and it was fantastic to see those places adapted to the screen. So there is some stuff to like, absolutely, but again, we we have to go back to the original problem of the writing. Put it like this: imagine you went to a car dealership, and amongst many regular cars, you spotted one standing there in the parking lot, a classic 1970s Ferrari. Classic red, beautiful and shiny, restored completely, not a scratch or a smidge on it, not a sign it was ever actually used. You go around it and the wheels shine on you and the windows are clean and the paint is gorgeous, and you go inside and the leather seats are comfortable and the dash looks great, and it's a dream come true. And you say to the dealer, "Can I take it for a ride?" And he says, "Oh, actually, the engine is broken and it doesn't run." And sort of in the same way, Rings of Power is a beautiful show that doesn't fulfill its most basic function, which is to be interesting and engaging, which is to work as a story. All the money in the world cannot just buy a competently written script, or rather, it can't do it when you hire the wrong people for the job. And of course, I am exaggerating a little bit now in the way that, as I said, there are elements and things that I did enjoy even outside of the visuals, but overall, the show is just average at best. And you cannot make a prestige show for this amount of money, for $1 billion, and pretend that just average is a satisfying result. It isn't. The expectations for this one were much higher, and I think justifiably so. The budget is one thing, but the prestige, the hype generated by Amazon's PR team, the importance of Tolkien in the fantasy fandom, and of course the fact that it's competing directly against House of the Dragon on HBO, which is coming out every week just 2 days after. And that show has proved week by week by week that it's possible to be far more gripping and engaging with just a well-written conversation rather than anything else. All in all, I wouldn't say The Rings of Power is a total shit show, because some people definitely said it is. It isn't, but it is definitely a disappointment. Will I tune in to the second season? Probably yes, even just to see if the showmakers accept the criticism and correct the course or not. For now though, if you're not a huge fantasy nerd, this show is far from a must-watch.